Breaking tonight, the Transatlantic alliance just faced its most dangerous moment in decades. America didn't negotiate, they threatened military seizure. Tensions are exploding across the North Atlantic tonight. Donald Trump announced escalating tariffs against 8 NATO allies to force the sale of Greenland. But instead of capitulation, European nations united in defiance, while Canada's Prime Minister delivered a masterclass in principled diplomacy from half a world away. Everyone believed Trump's tariff threats would force European compliance within weeks. Financial analysts expected Denmark to negotiate under pressure. Defense experts assumed NATO allies would quietly acquiesce to avoid economic damage. They were all utterly incorrect. Doha, Qatar, Sunday morning, January 18th, 2026. Standing before international press after securing billions in strategic investments for Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney made a statement that resonated across every NATO capital. We're concerned about this escalation. We always will support sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries wherever their geographic location is. Decisions about the future of Greenland are for Greenland and Denmark to decide. Translation. Canada just told Washington that threatening sovereign allies is non-negotiable. Not with tariffs, not with military posturing, not ever. And what happened next? The country that invested in principled diplomacy while building economic partnerships reveals exactly why Canadian influence is rising globally while American credibility collapses in real time. Dear viewers, let me walk you through what Trump actually proposed, because the details matter and they're genuinely unprecedented. 8 countries: Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland. 10% tariffs immediately, rising to 25% on June 1st if the United States doesn't reach a deal to purchase Greenland. Think about that language. Not if Greenland chooses independence, not if Denmark agrees to negotiate, if America doesn't get what it wants. This isn't diplomacy. This is economic extortion backed by the implicit threat of military action against NATO members who have stood with America for 75 years, members who activated Article 5 after September 11th. Members currently supporting Ukrainian resistance against Russian aggression, and Trump's threatening them to buy territory for you in 2026. The 8 European nations didn't waste time debating nuance. Their joint statement Sunday morning was diplomatically devastating. We stand in full solidarity with the people of Greenland and stand ready to engage in a dialogue based on the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity that we stand firmly behind. Tariff threats undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. That phrase, dangerous downward spiral, is diplomatic code. It means you're threatening the alliance itself. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because while Trump was tweeting tariff threats, Mark Carney was doing something completely different in Doha, building partnerships. The Prime Minister wasn't in Qatar by accident. He was there finalizing significant strategic investments in Canada's major infrastructure projects, capital that will accelerate construction timelines, energy sector investments that will create thousands of jobs, direct flight expansions that will boost tourism and business connections. After years of stalled negotiations, Canada is finalizing the investment promotion and protection agreement with Qatar by summer 2026. Canada is installing a defense attaché in Doha to deepen security partnerships. Carney called it a new chapter in bilateral relations. But listen to his reasoning. When the people of different countries are familiar with each other's cultures and perspectives, they're enriched and they trust each other more. And they also want to do more together, to build together. That's not just diplomatic boilerplate. That's a completely different theory of international relations than what's happening in Washington. Trump threatens allies to seize territory. Carney builds cultural connections to create mutual prosperity. One approach destroys trust. The other generates billions in committed investment. Guess which country is about to discover that economic influence flows towards stability, not chaos. Here's what makes Carney's Greenland statement so strategically brilliant. He didn't grandstand. He didn't lecture Washington about international law. He didn't position Canada as mediator or honest broker between America and Europe. He stated Canadian principles clearly and moved on to substantive business. We're concerned about this escalation, acknowledges the seriousness without amplifying the drama. Decisions about the future of Greenland are for Greenland and Denmark to decide, affirm sovereignty without attacking Trump personally. Then immediately back to Qatar investments, defense cooperation, economic partnerships. That's how you signal displeasure to Washington while demonstrating competence to everyone else. General Jenny Carignan, Canada's Chief of Defense Staff, reinforced this approach in her interview with Rosemary Barton Live. When asked about Trump's Greenland interest causing discussions within NATO, her response was measured but firm. I think we will navigate through this period of time with all of the allies around the table. I think we really need to engage and not cut the communication channels and keep engaging together. Translation: Canada isn't abandoning NATO because America's leadership is chaotic. Canada is becoming the steady hand that keeps allies talking. Denmark announced this week they're bolstering troop, naval, and air presence in Greenland in conjunction with NATO allies. When asked if Canada would contribute forces, Carignan confirmed, "We're always working closely with our Danish partner. There's definitely a lot of interest in Arctic security from a NATO perspective as well, and we will work together to do that." Notice what just happened. Arctic security, traditionally dominated by American and Russian competition, is becoming an arena where Canadian expertise matters, where Canadian partnerships with Nordic nations create strategic value independent of whatever Washington wants. That's not accidental. That's Carney's team systematically building Canadian influence in spaces where American credibility is evaporating. Between January and March 2026, something extraordinary is happening in transatlantic relationships. Washington pushes allies too hard, Ottawa says no, politely but firmly, and Canada, professional, patient Canada, becomes the North American partner. Every NATO nation starts calling first when they need someone reliable. The pattern is identical across every conversation. European officials reference Trump's Greenland demands with barely concealed alarm. They express concern about American unpredictability. They ask if Canada can help maintain stability in forums where Washington is creating chaos. Canada's answer is always the same: yes, and we'll respect your sovereignty while doing it. This isn't just about one failed territorial acquisition attempt. This is about the fundamental collapse of coercive diplomacy as a strategy and the rise of principled partnership as a new currency of influence. Think about what Qatar just committed to: billions in infrastructure investment, energy sector capital, tourism expansion, defense cooperation, a finalized investment protection agreement by summer. They didn't do that because Canada threatened them. They did it because Canada demonstrated reliability, respected their sovereignty, and offered mutually beneficial partnerships. Now think about what Trump got from his European tariff threats: a united statement of defiance, strengthened European solidarity, accelerated Danish military deployments to Greenland, and global headlines about America threatening its oldest allies. One approach generates investment and influence. The other generates isolation and alarm. Here's another detail that reveals how Canada's positioning itself globally. Trump invited Carney to join his Board of Peace, supervising Gaza's temporary governance. Initial reporting suggested this was simply about Canadian participation in Middle East stabilization. Then the actual charter leaked. 60 countries invited, $1 billion required for membership lasting more than 3 years. Each member state shall serve a term of no more than 3 years from this charter's entry into force, subject to renewal by the chairman. Translation: pay Trump $1 billion for the privilege of having a seat he can revoke at will. Canada's response: we're interested in participating because it's important to shape the process from within, but we're not paying for access and details need clarification. That's diplomatic genius. Canada signals willingness to engage on Middle East peace without legitimizing a pay-to-play structure. Canada gets credit for supporting peace efforts without endorsing Trump's monetization scheme. And crucially, Canada maintains presence at a table shaping post-conflict governance while retaining the moral authority to criticize how that table operates. This is what strategic diplomacy looks like: maximizing influence while minimizing compromise of principles. Carney wraps his 9-day international trip at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Think about that itinerary: Doha securing billions in Qatari investment, Davos networking with global economic leaders. Between them, statements on NATO sovereignty, Arctic security, Middle East governance. This isn't a publicity tour. This is systematic relationship building in every forum where decisions actually get made. While Trump tweets tariff threats from Mar-a-Lago, Carney's in conference rooms securing capital commitments. While Washington alienates allies with territorial demands, Ottawa's finalizing investment protection agreements. While American credibility collapses under the weight of erratic foreign policy, Canadian reliability becomes the selling point that opens doors everywhere else. The timing is almost too perfect. Trump threatens European NATO allies over Greenland the same weekend Carney's in Doha, demonstrating exactly how partnership-based diplomacy generates tangible economic results. European leaders aren't stupid. They see the contrast, they're drawing conclusions, and those conclusions are reshaping where they look for reliable North American partnership. Let me return to Carney's core statement because this matters more than it might initially appear. We always will support sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries wherever their geographic location is. Wherever their geographic location is. That phrase does enormous work. It means Canadian support for sovereignty isn't conditional on strategic convenience or alliance politics. It means Canada won't support territorial seizure even when it's America doing the seizing. It means principles actually constrain Canadian foreign policy. And here's why that matters economically. Predictability is valuable. Countries investing in Canadian infrastructure know Canada won't suddenly threaten sanctions if they displease Ottawa. Nations negotiating with Canada know agreements will be honored regardless of who's prime minister. Partners working with Canada know sovereignty will be respected even when that's inconvenient. That predictability generates trust. Trust generates investment. Investment generates influence. Influence generates more partnerships. It's a reinforcing cycle. Trump's approach generates the opposite cycle. Threats generate defiance. Defiance generates isolation. Isolation generates desperation. Desperation generates more extreme threats. It's a downward spiral with no bottom. Dear viewers, here's what the next 3 months will reveal. Trump's tariffs either get implemented or they don't. If implemented, European retaliation triggers trade war with America's closest allies, while Canada maintains open channels. If abandoned, Trump looks weak, while Carney's principled opposition looks prescient. Denmark's military buildup in Greenland either proceeds with NATO support or doesn't. If it proceeds, Canada's Arctic security partnership with Nordic nations deepens, while American influence in the region faces new constraints. If it doesn't, European concerns about American reliability get validated. Qatar's investment commitments either materialize or don't. If they materialize, Carney demonstrates tangible economic results from diplomatic engagement, while Trump's threats produce nothing. If they don't, at least Canada tried partnership rather than coercion. Every scenario makes Canada look better and American chaos look worse. That's not luck. That's strategy. Carney's team positioned Canada on the right side of every major inflection point while maintaining flexibility to adapt as situations evolve. So when Prime Minister Carney said decisions about the future of Greenland are for Greenland and Denmark to decide, what was he actually saying? He was saying Canada won't support territorial revision through economic coercion. He was saying Canadian foreign policy is grounded in principles that constrain even powerful allies. He was saying the path to global influence runs through partnership, not domination. He was saying Canada is available as a reliable alternative for countries alarmed by American unpredictability. And most importantly, he was saying all of this while simultaneously securing billions in Qatari investment, finalizing protection agreements, expanding defense cooperation, and preparing for Davos networking. Words backed by results. Principles demonstrated through action, criticism paired with alternatives.